שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד אחד ברוך ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם לעולם ועד ברוך ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד יי די 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 yay day 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 yay day 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 yay day 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 day
ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ברית עולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ברית עולם ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ וביום השביעי שבת ויהי נפש ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ברית עולם
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom,
Test. I'm ready when I'm ready. All right. So we can just go? Okay. Still people wondering. Let me just see one thing. Well, welcome to the second installment of Planting Prayer in the Planting Prayer in the Blessings of Broadway. And I'm so glad you returned. This evening will be slightly shorter than the previous one. We'll be ending at about 11:45 p.m., okay? Seriously, our hope is to try and make it about an hour, maybe a little bit shorter. And we've also heard we heard a lot of very positive feedback, but we did hear that perhaps it went a little bit late, which we know for a few reasons. But we're also considering maybe moving it a half an hour earlier anyways. And I see from some folks are nodding their heads vigorously, affirmatively, and others the other direction, which is completely consistent with any change initiative. Is it too warm in here? Is it too cold? Okay, right. So we will figure it out. And I guess that what that'll mean is we'll start at 7:15. I'm joking. We will figure it out as we go. But really, so glad that so many of you are joining us here in the sanctuary and also at home. And let us begin in a minute with our first introduction. We'll be hearing from somebody who I think is near and dear to many of those in our hearts. When asked on a golf course about what his handicap is, he offered a response: "Talk about a handicap. I'm a one-eyed black man who's Jewish." Who is it? Sammy Davis.
My dear old Roma, the folks back home may see me no more now that I'm at Roma's door. Fettuccine, fettuccine, how I love my fettuccine. Chicken cacciatore, chicken cacciatore. I love the sauce they make. Oh, listen, Roma, how I love you, my dear old Roma. I'd give the world to stay here in the town they spell with an R and an O and an M and an A. Ah, listen, how I miss it, my dear old Roma. The folks back home will see me no more now that I'm at Roma, now that I'm at Roma, now that I'm at Roma.
Particularly moved by the perseverance of Jews and Judaism to survive in a difficult world. We'll be hearing from Sammy Davis Jr. offering to us a song by the name of Swanee, or actually it's a score of Swanee. So that was a little bit of a teaser. Before we learn more about the composer, the playwright of that piece, the lyricist, George Gershwin, who of course was born Jacob Gershwin. Before we get into that in a minute, we're just going to take one step back and listen to our creation from last week. Does anyone remember what it was? Lecha Dodi, set to I Dreamed a Dream.
Just to remind us what we did last week. So we're just going to repeat one time. What was amazing how this I Dream a Dream match Lecha Dodi so perfect. I really don't believe. You know, one of the things that I do, I try with all the song, all the prayer, what is really matched. Like I said, Lecha Dodi, this was a perfect song for I Dream a Dream. Okay. Lecha Dodi לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. שמור וזכור בדיבורך, השמיענו אל המיוחד. אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, לשם ולתפארת ולתהילה. Lecha Dodi לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי היא מקור הברכה. מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. Lecha Dodi לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי, התעוררי, כי בא אורך קומי אורי. אורי, אורי, שיר דברי. כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. בואי בשלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצהלה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, בואי חלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה. Lecha Dodi לקראת כלה, בני שבת נקבלה.
That was lovely. And to review, I'm trying to take at least one pearl, one treasure, one takeaway, one enduring lesson from each of our sessions together. And the main element that I was hoping we would digest or internalize of the connection between the creation of these Broadway scores and the magical emanation of our liturgy, the connection between the two is that it's important to be able to situate the piece of liturgy both in its time of its composition, in its context, as well as relative to where it resides to other pieces of liturgy. Meaning that Les Mis is not fully appreciated, or I Dream a Dream is not fully appreciated unless we understand its historical context for that song. If we don't understand the historical context both for the person who first wrote Les Mis, as well as understanding that when it's being offered to a certain audience, and how we relate to it both is informed by the historical context under which it's written, its relationship to the other songs in the score, as well as to its adaptation in theater, as well as to us who, in our time, in our period, how we hear it. So understanding the historical context, both to the scores, how they originate, gives us a deeper appreciation of the songs themselves and helps us to connect to them more deeply. And the same is true of liturgy. When we understand more deeply and more completely, more fully where the prayers come from and their relationship to the other prayers and how they are then offered in liturgical form in their historical context, we better have a better understanding of liturgy. Okay, so understanding the history and the context historically for the compositions, whether in Broadway or in our liturgical tradition, are very important for a deeper, fuller, more complete understanding connection to the liturgical experience. So we just heard Swanee by George Gershwin, which was George Gershwin's really first major production. And by the way, Gershwin, he had Ukrainian Jewish origins. I'm constantly thinking of the Ukraine as an O-U-R. His grandfather was actually named Yaakov, so he was named after his grandfather. His born name was Jacob, and he was born actually in Odessa. And as the story goes, his parents bought the Gershwin boys, of course, Ira and George had an ongoing partnership throughout their lives, and really their parents bought the kids a piano. The piano was really bought for Ira, but George had been practicing a little bit on his own prior to receiving the piano. His parents didn't really know this, and so George really took a liking to it more to Ira. They were fine with that, but that's how George really became more of, you could say, the leader among the brothers. And then the other interesting thing about Gershwin is that he started at a very, very young age. In fact, as the story goes, Irving Berlin, who we'll talk about another time, another well-known figure who left a tremendous imprint on this genre, also Jewish, Irving Berlin actually hired Gershwin to help him with some of these song compositions, kind of as an understudy. And he would give Gershwin his songs to sort of rehearse or improve upon. But Gershwin would take Berling's songs and totally adapt them how he wanted it, what his the chutzpah of a young guy saying that I'm going to improve or modify Gershwin to my liking, to my suitability. And so basically Berlin fires him and he doesn't go back to school. He just continues on, and at a very young age, I think by age, I think in his late teens or early 20s, he had already put forward Swanee as a major success. We may be familiar with the fact that Gershwin, unlike many of the other composers, actually died very young at the age of 38. And just think of given what his contributions have been, think of what he would have achieved had he lived a full life. But despite this, from this early stage with his parents gifting him a piano, to his work on Tin Pan Alley, to then emerging from living in the Yiddish theater district of New York, to then being really this acclaimed leader in the field. It really demonstrates the possibilities of what could happen when Jews of that era built upon their cultural experience, but also their desire or ability to infuse or navigate between two different worlds. Because what Gershwin, already what he was doing with Berlin's music, was saying, hey, this is a piece of music that's familiar to me or known classically, but I can improve upon it by integrating in other forms of music, right? And he was able to do that because he himself was navigating these two worlds. So yes, he did have this incredible background and experience as, obviously musically talented, obviously literarily capable, but also as an immigrant, as a Jewish immigrant, and navigating between these two literary domains of Hebrew and English and the Jewish experience and the majority non-Jewish experience. He then was able to deal in a world of complexity and sophistication to be able to build upon that for other nuances. And so what he is really best known for is the fact that he took classical music and infused it with what? Jazz, right? And at the time, this was a truly courageous step, because you have to think about it, what it takes to build a career, what it takes to build a reputation, and he's still even though he's successful, he's still relatively young. And he's putting himself in a very dangerous place, right? Because at one level, will the African American community praise him for infusing into taking their music, or what's considered their domain, and using it for an alternative audience? Will the classical folks, who tend to operate in a totally different sphere of not just music, but of society, will they be comfortable with the infusion of jazz into that domain? And of course, you have the Jews, right, who are going to say, well, is this a good thing for a nice Jewish boy to be doing, right? To try and integrate these worlds of the classical and the jazz, and for this to be undertaken by a Jew, no less. So this is actually really, it could have completely destroyed Gershwin, and yet he had that courageous and devoted sense of self that it would succeed. And so his first attempt at this, and we'll be hearing in a moment, is the Rhapsody in Blue, and this particular Okay, we'll move on. The next emanation of this development. So let's keep in mind he begins with writing songs in Tin Pan Alley with Irving Berlin. Then he takes a step forward in a more traditional sense with Swanee, and then before too long he starts to integrate classical music with jazz music. But then what does he do? He takes it to a whole nother level, and he says, I'm going to go ahead and integrate jazz music with the opera. And these two worlds really talk about a total collision. Really did not naturally, some would say, would fit with one another. And everything that had gone previous, of all the controversies or conflicts or tensions that existed, now became even more so. Why? Because the theme that he chose to develop this was around a book named Porgy and Bess. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with how this literature developed, but there was a style in the era called privatism, which is an understanding that through a European lens, one could go to an indigenous society and capture them in their innocent form to be revealed to the grander society. So maybe you've seen this in some of the artistic works of Gauguin or Rousseau, where they've traveled to these areas, usually the tropics, and you see them capturing the indigenous people. Well, Porgy and Bess was this same style, not done in the visual form, but done in the literary form. And there was a gentleman, Du Bois Hayward, who had come from modest means, and he was a founder of the Charleston Poetry Society. And he himself felt, well, if I could convey or represent the African American experience in Charleston to the wider audience, I would be doing justice to the greater society in the same way that was being done in the visual format. And so, because, of course, Gershwin sees that this is being done in the literary form, he says, I can capitalize on this. I want to be able to have a piece that can navigate between these two worlds. What better way to do this than to build upon something that's already situating this experience in literature to a predominantly white audience based out of Charleston. So he actually goes down to Charleston. Can you imagine this? He goes down to Charleston, spends time in Charleston, and really does a case study independently of learning and listening to the music of that area with African Americans. Well, of course, this has a dramatic impact, literally, on the creation of the score, which is done really as a collaboration between, of all people, Hayward's wife, who had somewhat of an operatic background, and the Gershwin brothers. And so this now, we then see the play, which is really casts in very stereotypical representations of the African American community from the South as being indigent. The play involves a murder scene. It involves what some would say prostitution. A main character, Porgy, who's he's handicapped physically. So it's representing the African American community in a very limited way. And at this time, it's being showcased in New York and Boston, where you have at this point, this is no longer the Civil War era. You have now a burgeoning, strengthening, class elevated, of a higher educated African American communities. So not only is there now the layer of the tension of these two worlds of jazz and classical music being integrated, but also now on top of that you have the opera, right, which brings it to another level. And then on top of it, it's based in a literary form that itself, some would say, is building upon or capitalizing upon the showcasing the African American experience done by a Jew. And Gershwin knew fully in doing this what he was trying to achieve. So let's hear probably the best known piece from Porgy and Bess, Summertime. Okay, I'm going to talk over the piece, and maybe, Matt, if you could, when you have a chance, to just go directly into Ain't Necessarily So. As he's queuing it up, I'll just share a little bit more about Summertime. That the piece is actually it's played more than once. I think it's played 3 or 4 times during the musical, and it's sung as a lullaby. But it has in its opening refrain, "Fish are jumping, and the cotton is high," right? So there's all this symbolism of slavery in the piece, and so there's a lot of controversy when this and other pieces of this score are presented, because to an African American audience, maybe this is not how they want to be represented, and be represented in an opera to a predominantly white audience done by a Jew. Some would say.
And the Lord said to himself, I gotta get busy and make me some kinfolk. So he made Adam. Then you see that Adam got one extra rib to spare. So he take that extra rib and he make woman from a spare rib. The Lord got him. The Lord got
Kinfolk. That's right. Kinfolk. The Lord got you, and the good book got you. And you all got the good book bad. But it ain't necessarily so. It ain't necessarily so. The things that you're liable to read in the Bible, it ain't necessarily so. Little David was small, but oh my. Little David was small, but oh my. He fought big Goliath, who lay down and dieth. Little David was small, but oh my. Wadu, Simbambadu, Scatawada, Scattywa. Yeah. Oh, Jonah, he lived in the whale. Oh, Jonah, he lived in the whale. For he made his home in that fish's abdomen. And oh, Jonah, he lived in the whale. Little Moses was found in a stream. Little Moses was found in a stream. He floated on water till old Pharaoh's daughter, she fished him, she said, from that stream. Wadu, Simbambadu, Hadabadadida, Scattywa, Scattywa. Yeah, it ain't necessarily so. It ain't necessarily so. They tell all you chillin', the devil's a villain, but it ain't necessarily so. Till get into heaven, don't snap for a 7, live clean, don't have no fault. Amen. Oh, I takes that gospel whenever it's possible, but with a grain of salt. Methuselah lived 900 years. Methuselah lived 900 years. But who calls that living when no gal will give in to no man what's 900 years? Wadu, Simbambadu, Scooby-Walla, Scattywa.
some would say it's also playing with a sense of sacrilege. To, you know, what is this inherited white culture that has been delivered to you, and to what extent is it yours, and to what extent do you empower yourselves as a population with this? And that's really boldly disruptive to contrast the African American church experience with the white church experience done in an opera setting and released or created by a Jew. Okay, so this is majorly controversial, and lo and behold, in its time, it didn't succeed. It was essentially, I mean, it did play a little bit, but we would not be talking about Summertime and George Gershwin if it were not for Billie Holiday. And Billie Holiday was a singer of her era that then 2 years after Gershwin released his opera, after it had run its course, she was an up-and-coming black jazz lyricist and singer who then chose herself to take this and produce it in Harlem according to her own experience. And she did not do it as an opera. She did it entirely as a jazz piece, speaking about it from an African American experience. And she also is now taking a courageous leap forward. Why? Because she's now building upon what had been already received with a certain amount of controversy and disdain by her own population. But she is saying to herself, wait a second, this is a well-known piece. This is something that does speak from my background of my people, and I can build upon the fact that I have this platform and now use it for my own. Okay? So let's hear the
cotton is high. Oh, your dad is rich and your ma is good looking. So hush, little baby, don't you cry. One of these mornings you're going to rise up singing, then you'll spread your wings and you'll take the sky. But till that morning, there's nothing can harm you. With Daddy and Mammy standing by.
the same stereotypes, the same disabled primary character, the same backdrop of murder, the same situating in the African American Southern experience, but a totally different rendering for an entirely different purpose now being presented by an African American to an African American audience out of Harlem. So part of what I'm trying to showcase a little bit, and we'll see it with Mahalia Jackson, is that when you have a piece of text and it's rendered, it's not just about the historical context in which it's being offered originally. That's a piece of understanding liturgy. But another piece of understanding it is that a piece in of itself can develop and evolve in an ongoing way. Keep in mind what I said in the beginning, that Summertime is probably the most re-rendered piece of music in all of music history. It's been re-released 25,000 times. 25,000 times. And you're seeing the beginning of that. And Gershwin didn't even live to see Jackson's composition. And I'm telling you, if Billie Holiday had never come along, and that was the first time that the piece actually reached the charts, that we would never have even probably have heard of the score. So, it's
Summertime and the living is easy. Fish are jumping and the cotton is high. Hush, little baby, don't you cry. One of these mornings you gonna rise up singing. You're gonna spread your wings, take to the sky, but tell that morning, oh, nothing will harm you. With Dad and Mommy, they'll be standing by. Sometime I feel like a motherless child. Sometime I feel motherless child. Sometime I feel like a motherless child. Just a long, long way from my home. a long, long way, Lord, from my home.
Totally seamless, right? Totally different song. Okay, so let me explain what's going on here. This piece sounds different from the jazz piece, which sounds different from the opera piece. So why a motherless child? Because the question was, we know we got that Gershwin took the piece of music from the original, it emanated from the Porgy book from Hayward. But where did the music come from? Where did the music come from? And it's suggested that the minor keys that he was familiar with in Yiddish theater and Jewish liturgy are what he picked up on when he heard some of the songs down in Charleston. And what the suggestion is that a motherless child is the song that best fits to the score that he then created from the operatic piece. And so now Jackson is now responding to saying, hey, this is our music and I want to be able to represent it in its original form and show where it was borrowed from. Okay, so that's where she is, and there's a soulful energy to it because she's claiming it in a religious context. We can feel that. If we were to say, okay, someone is borrowing something from Judaism, we at a deep level of our identity say that's part of mine, that's part of my religious character. Even if you don't even experience it or would express it in a religious context, you would say that is part of my heritage, my identity, so I want to be able to make sure that the world hears that this piece came from something that was inherently, originally mine. So even though the piece sounds different from the jazz piece and different from the operatic piece, it's a way of, again, this composer, this artist, trying to claim, especially at the time of its delivery, something that is being seen as inherently, innately African American. Okay? All right, I'll stop talking for a second because I know we're all waiting for hearing a particular composition, and I think you'll recognize the prayer, and after Cantor delivers it, I'll explain a little bit about why we set summertime to this particular piece of liturgy.
Okay. Number one, I don't need this one. I know this by heart after all this year. First of all, Gershwin, this came out from the Hebrew name Gershon.
Gershon.
Gershon, and this written, you know, in the Torah in Bamidbar, Parshat Naso et Rosh Bnei Gershon, was a lady, it's come from the Torah, you know, from Naso. And you know, this reminds me when she sing, wow, you know, in the Yemeni wedding, in the Sephardic wedding, this what they do, wow, you know, the Yemeni, this how they sing, they make. So each one has a different feeling, different way. And I have my way. So, and yeah, exactly.
And most of her compositions come from the African American church and speak to the African American church.
And
go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the black church that we went over there, you know, and then this how they yelled it. You're gonna feel after I'm going to sing the song why I really put this Baruch and Shema for summertime.
You've heard of Baruch and Shema, I hope.
Yeah, I'm gonna connect Baruch and Shema, really a holy prayer for summertime. This is the minor key. ברכו את אדוני המבורך, ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברכו את אדוני המבורך, ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברכו את אדוני המבורך, ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברכו את אדוני המבורך, ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. You know, after I feel the summertime has a little bit schmaltz, you know, the schmaltz. So the feeling, Baruch Hu and Shema is a very holy prayer. So this has a feeling, has a schmaltz here, you know. So this is why I put this together, because this very holy prayer, and at the first song you can have a feeling of the song when you sing.
George would have loved it for sure. So why Cantor has his world of how these connect to one another, and I have my own. And the reason what I'm trying to share again is that how you have an immediate piece of text, okay, related to a culture that we may or may not understand, and then you have multiple compositions that happen, and then an emergence of a whole diversity of creations, 25,000 or more of which, what if I told you, well, let me ask you, can somebody tell me the verse or the chapter or the section of Torah that the Baruch Hu comes from? Does it come from Genesis or Numbers or Leviticus? Okay. If you'll open up your prayer books for just a moment to page 108. 108. 108. Okay, so we have our call to prayer. Okay, it's a call to worship. Praise and honor and praise is due forever. Praise be on I to whom praise is due now and forever. So wake up, we're now assembled. By the way, the first time you need to come together for 10 people, 10 Jews for a minyan, isn't at the beginning of a prayer service. It's not when you light the candles. It's not with Shalom Aleichem. It's not L'chadodi. We have to assemble 10 for the Baruch Hu. This is really the beginning of the liturgical experience. This is when we're asked to assemble. This is when we're called together as a people to come together. This is the emergence. Everything that precedes it is kind of like a warm-up. This is the real deal. Okay? And then as we turn the page, now that we're assembled, now that we hear the cry of God, we're now on page 100, and we just went from page 108 to 110. Okay, Yotzer Or. Okay, we're at the creation of the world. We're at the beginning, the fashioning of the universe. We're at the beginning of the beginnings. This situates us in what holiday? The beginning of the beginnings, the creation of the world, the assembly of the universe. Which holiday? Rosh Hashanah. Good. Gold star. Thank God. Okay. So the beginnings of the beginning. And then once we have the beginnings of the beginning, we turn to page 112, saying, okay, we have the emergence of the story of creation, of the world, of humanity's place in it. But we are not alone. We have a special covenantal attachment. That's why we're gathered here together, not just to be together, not just to be together for the beginning of the creation of the universe, but to come together with holy and sacred responsibility one to the other, in covenantal and abiding love for one another, in shared devotion with God, with our heritage, with our Jewish people, past, present, and future. That sense of covenant, okay? And then we turn the page to the words of the Shema, which ask us to, now that we are assembled in covenant, we're assembled in covenant for what's called in theological terms a doxology statement, a principle statement, an articulation of faith, which declares two elements. One, that God is supreme and all-powerful, that oneness, as well as that God provides for us a sense of purpose and understanding the world, because the oneness of the world is a oneness that transcends uncertainty and transcends difficulty and challenge, that it's a world of goodness, of morality, and moral purpose and moral understanding. Okay? That there's a oneness, a truth to the world. Okay? So we think of it as a statement of monotheism, which in some ways it is, but it's also the understanding that the God of Judaism is supreme and all-powerful, as well as God is the God of alone, in the sense of being there's a singularity to the understanding of morality and ethics to which we're striving for, to which we're seeking. Okay? So, and you have that understanding as a singular attachment of understanding through the covenant of Israel. And because we have this beginning that we're coming together for, and we have this sense of oneness and supremacy and covenantal attachment, then therefore we're obligated to do what in this covenantal understanding of moral and purpose? It's not moral and purpose to just do anything in the world. It's to fulfill it with Jewish obligation and Jewish responsibility. And that's what we have as we turn the page to the V'ahavta, which is the statement of our responsibilities and obligations that are given to us at all times and all places. Okay, and that we are to pursue these as we turn to page 118. That we are to pursue these from all the different places of the world. So it's if we pursue the covenant, if we pursue these moral obligations and purpose, then we will be able to achieve the incoming of the exiles, for which we all pray, and towards the beckoning of a new world. Okay, from the ingathering from the various corners of the earth that we are brought together. Because isn't that what we feel a lot of times in this world, a sense of disconnection and disparate and being disattached and disassembled, both communally and individually? So by doing this activity, we feel a sense of connection to the greater experience of being human, the greater experience of being Jewish, and we pray the various experience of overcoming various challenges in our lives. Okay, so why am I saying all this? And I could talk about the Baruch Hu and the Shema for a very long time, but the reason I wanted to situate it with this in the understanding of summertime is that the text of the Shema, okay, in the Bible, there isn't even a text of the Baruch Hu. The Baruch Hu and the Shema are situated right next to each other. Cantor just sung them one together. And in fact, a lot of times liturgically, that's what's offered, but they're not necessarily connected. We, rabbinically, choose to connect them through our liturgy. And all these other subsequent prayers that I offered of this covenantal understandings of the Vahavta immediately follows the Shema. But the ingathering of the exiles, or what follows even that, Emet V'Yatziv, the statement of ultimate truth, these are disparate elements of the Torah that are all then reassembled by rabbis between the 1st and the 3rd centuries, where they place the Shema as the centerpiece of this. Before this, you just have a piece of text, right? So it's very similar in many ways to what we just experienced. You have an original text, and then later on, through other adaptations, it reemerges in a new format that then speaks to the people who are receiving it. And some of it is attached to its original source, but some of it is reconstructed in order to have meaning and purpose to what the rabbis are suggesting is necessary in our world that we live in. And if we didn't have this liturgical development, this evolution, we wouldn't still be reciting the Shema. The same way that if these people who came after Gershwin did not themselves claim in their time and space what their understanding of their truth and their authenticity, and didn't speak with their confidence and their courage in their day and age, if Holiday never came along, I would propose that we would probably never be talking about summertime. And the same way, if the rabbis never came along and offered to us this evolutionary development from the original textual format, we would not be then, therefore, still connected to the Shema, or even perhaps the Torah. So this performative adaptation, dramatic development, evolution that Gershwin is doing, that is part of the Jewish experience of taking original texts and bringing them alive, and their later adaptations, that activity is literally the same thing that we are doing with prayer. And you see that with summertime. And the same way that Cantor just offered us in his beautiful way the adaptation of the Shema to summertime, okay? How many different Shmas are there? There's like endless numbers of Shmas. You could literally hear them many times over. Same thing is true of summertime. It's very similar in that regard. So to me, that's what they merited. I just want to get one piece of text before you, and then we'll have two last pieces of music that I think will be really powerful. Can we go to slide 18? There's a delay for slide 18? Or just delay for the videos? Okay, we got 5 minutes more, I promise. I'm going to read it to you. Okay, let's just go then to, let's go straight then to queuing up, Matt, the piece from Vilnius. The one that precedes slide 20. And before we do that, I just want to read this piece of text. It's from the Mishnah. After the priests completing laying the parts of the daily offering on the ramp, they went to the chamber of hewn stone to recite the Shema. The appointed priest who oversaw the lotteries in the temple said to the priests, "Recite a single blessing of the blessings that accompany the Shema." And the members of the priestly watch recited a blessing, and then they recited the Ten Commandments. And in 1911, there was a piece of papyrus found in Egypt that had the Shema and then the Decalogue. So the rabbis, we don't even have the Decalogue in our liturgy. And yet, the priests in the temple, according to the Mishnah, had the Shema being recited prior to the Decalogues. So at each twist and turn of Judaism, to help Judaism breathe alive, there's a necessity by the rabbis, by the rabbinic tradition, to say, how do we take a temple-based practice and make it applicable to our day and our life? And they chose, for very specific reasons, to not include the Decalogue, but to still include the Baruch Hu. Because the Baruch Hu is mentioned in the Mishnah, and the Decalogue is mentioned in the Mishnah, but we only have the Baruch Hu in our liturgy, and what's replaced with the Decalogue is all those other elements that I offered you tonight of our liturgical evolution. We're there? motherless child. And so within these different dimensions of the human experience, what's being captured in the melody with Summertime, with the Ukrainian lullaby, with a motherless child, it is this state of some dimension of displacement, of suffering, of agony, of tearing, and a desire to have that music and that statement evolve in such a way with a purposeful intent, with meaning, with attachment. And the rabbis do that through not only taking the tunes, right? We have the cantorial tradition, but they choose to develop upon it and embrace it fully in terms of liturgical development, which is ultimately what's preserved us. You're hearing, this is what Lithuanian non-Jews are bringing to be responsive in the moment, and I just wanted us to hear what Jews are doing through our liturgical tradition in this moment, in the same type of creative genesis that we see the rabbis doing from centuries ago. So is this going to go for 2 minutes now? Or? So we went 15 minutes over.
Teach your children age. Teach them how to fight. I'ma teach my children how to love with all of their might, with all of your heart, all of your soul, all of your might. All of your heart, all of your soul, all of your might. Shema Yisroel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Release me from their schemes, my distress. You will relieve. Guard me on a path that's dark and slippery. They seek deception and futility, but I stand with integrity. Sneak to the roof of that building. I didn't want nobody there to see me. Say that we're living in a fantasy, but I believe if I dig deep and I plead in sincerity, won't you utterly remove the cloud hanging over me? Won't you wave the decree in the shade of your wings? Shelter me from the wicked who have plundered me, from my mortal enemy. Won't you shield me?
Yahoo. It's a contemporary reggae Jewish, huh?
Release me from their scheme.
stories relative to one another, that is both similar to, the parallel exists both for Broadway as a theme as well as liturgy. Tonight's takeaway, I hope, was the understanding that the text lives through us. The text lives through us, through the ability of us, all of us, not just rabbis, all of us as Jews, as part of the rabbinic tradition, to help those texts come alive. And there were certain elements, even of the Shema, that were adapted post the temple period, immediately afterwards, that helped to emanate and breathe and give meaning to the Shema. And the reason I wanted to end on the final two pieces, that's okay, we don't have to play these pieces, we'll save it for another time. Reason I want to end on these two pieces is that the same way that the piece for the Ukraine, that lullaby, had relevance to Gershwin in terms of the development of Summertime, that piece now speaks to us because it's being delivered in a certain time in a certain place. That's what brings its meaningfulness. Because what is our other attachment to the lullaby, right? And with the final piece, what I'd ask us to ponder and consider as we move forward in the 21st century, what is prayer going to look like? What are the words of prayer going to mean to us? Are we in a different time and place, in part of the Reformed tradition and part of the rabbinical tradition, to help our texts speak to us in our day and age? And our prayers for the 21st century going to look, is that a prayer that Matisyahu is offering? And are we willing in the 21st century to have some of those prayers and some of their emanations, both in terms of their theme, both in terms of their style, but also their content, bear relevance in our lives? Because that's ultimately what brings power to the text. Not the text itself, but what we are willing to bring to it. That's what Gershwin did. That's what was done on Broadway. That's what the rabbinic rabbis did with our liturgy, and that's what we're asked to do in our time, in our place. Thank you. And please make sure, oh yeah, you too. Please make sure to take a cookie on your way out.